It's your girl Key, and this Facebook Live is all about how to start feeling good enough. Because we know that if we're on a journey to getting the love that we deserve, feeling good enough is so important. Because, well, I write about this in my book, Why Love Hurts and Why Self-Love is the Key, it means that we treat ourselves with a certain amount of respect that we deserve. And should we not feel good enough about ourselves, if our self-esteem or confidence is low, it's highly likely that we are going to accept, tolerate, and explain away nonsense behavior that is incredibly unhealthy for us. So I'm a little distracted as I share this around my social media network, so do forgive me, but feeling good enough is paramount to our well-being. And so it's really important that we are, and the impact of this has far-reaching consequences for many aspects of our lives. So it's not just like in intimate relationships, but when I think about my own experience, it showed up the most. My issues with my self-esteem and confidence showed up the most in my intimate well, actually, it was quite cataclysmic in my intimate relationships, because it paved way for emotional, mental, and psychological abuse, as well as physical. And that's one of the reasons why I am adamant about, very much clear about, helping people to get clear about our self-esteem. And so one of the things I hear time and time again is that I don't feel good enough. It's about not feeling good enough, or feeling really low and having limited self-worth. And that experience feeds into, ooh, can I get a like? Can I get a thumbs up there? When we don't like who we are, when we are not our best friend, it actually means that we're highly vulnerable and susceptible to others and their opinion of us. And the challenge is, if they change their mind, as humans often do because humans are fickle, it means that you're going to be exceptionally vulnerable. Yeah. And that the reason why you're exceptionally vulnerable is because your self-esteem is wrapped up in somebody else. And when it's wrapped up in somebody else, when they change their mind, if they decide that they don't want you anymore, then it's going to be, well, as I said before, is going to be cataclysmic, and that isn't what we want for ourselves. What we want for ourselves is to have an internal reference, so that we're able to come from a place of knowing our worth. And the benefit of that is, if we know our worth, when nonsense behavior comes our way, we can wave it away, because that is not in keeping with how one would treat themselves. And that's why I'm a massive advocate of building our self-esteem, because what happened to me over the years as I built that up is it meant that, especially in intimate relationships, the individuals who I may have once been drawn to, that no longer happened, because I worked on myself and I was able to address my feelings of inadequacy. And one way that I dealt with my feelings of inadequacy was to educate myself. I think education is a massively important transformative tool. It changed my career. Before I was educated, I was working at IKEA. Big love to my IKEA massive. And I moved from a cashier to a supervisor at the tills. But I almost felt like I'd hit a glass ceiling, and I couldn't get up beyond that. And so education just really transformed my world. But not only did it transform my career, it transformed my self-esteem, because it made me rethink how I was like, I'm smart. And I hadn't thought that I really was. I left school with no GCSEs. And if you know my story, you'll be probably bored by hearing this. So when I was in a position where now I was like able to apply for different jobs and to think about having a career that did wonders for my self-esteem. But it didn't mean that I wasn't still always drawn to some sort of excitement or mayhem, but that became much more reduced. And I think that is a massive benefit of working on your self-esteem. Now, it doesn't always have to be education as a transformative, it is a transformative tool, but it can also be whatever it is for you, about you. So if you've got any questions, because you know Key can wax lyrical and I can talk about my story and my journey all day long, I'd be glad to take your questions, and I'd be glad to find my way to find answers for you. I'm up for that. I'm here for half an hour, and if you want me to stay on, I can make those allowances too. So, like I said, not feeling good enough is a massive one, and one that I pay attention to. And the reason why feeling good enough is like really important is, one, if you're also a perfectionist, it also means you never hit the mark, because your standards are incredibly high, and even if you do achieve, you always beat up on yourself. So feeling good enough is about it kind of ties in with acceptance, you know, of acceptance of who you are. And it's not about saying I'm the best, but it's about knowing your worth. And so if we go into relationships where we don't know our worth, if we go into relationships where our self-esteem purely comes from a person, our partner, I can't like convey enough how susceptible and vulnerable we are, because we know humans change their mind. And if somebody changes their mind on you and you're left high and dry, then it's highly likely you're either going to start to engage in some behaviors where you may feel embarrassed or humiliated when we call them for the 101st time, 101th, the 100th time, or we start doing things that we're not necessarily proud of. For example, stalking is, well, they call it, you know, online stalking, which might mean, you know, looking at your partner, your ex, their profile, and you have to kind of get to a sense like, is that good for you? You have to make those decisions, because what can happen is when that person leaves us or that relationship breaks down, or not even that, when they start to take liberties or they start to demand things from us, or you know what they're like, they got a dream and they want to achieve this, and all of a sudden they need a loan, they need some money, or they've just been made homeless, and all of a sudden you become the person that is rescuing, finding solution for their multitude of complex problems. Then, well, I guess in my view, that leaves us very susceptible to abuse and violation, because we are, what is the word I want? We are very dependent upon that person to validate us. And that's why when I began reading self-help books some 20 odd years ago, I think what I loved about it was it explained stuff to me, but what it also meant was I took steps to make changes. And I say this to everybody, you can read self-help books all day. The true challenge comes when you apply what you know to your behavior. Can you apply the insights into your behavior? We can all put up Facebook memes and wonderful quotes, and there's no chastisement about that. I just think there is also, what is your experience? Have you begun to walk the walk? And so when we never feel good enough, when we sometimes hate or we sometimes loathe who we are, can I get a thumbs up from my online crew? I'd be grateful. No, I'm not alone. Where was I? I'm saying when we are exclusively dependent upon other people to validate us, what will ultimately end up happening, and I talked about this in the video I did today about depression, and my reason, why I believe depression, one of the reasons why I think depression is becoming an epidemic, is because people are so disconnected from who they truly are and their authentic self. And I think a massive part of that is not liking who we are. So if you would like to learn about how to feel good enough, then ask me your questions. What are your blocks? I know when I started out on my journey, like one of the biggest, like I started with self-help books anyhow. So like I could do a self-help book that was cheap. And then I think one of the biggest challenges I found was my fears. And, you know, we all have fears, and some fears are rational. Some of our fears are irrational. But you can only learn how real your fears are when you face them. And that's the key, and that's the secret. Otherwise, you've got a theory in your head about how stuff will be. It will be like X, Y, Z if I do A, B, C. But until you actually do it, you'll never know. And so one of the factors like is also like not feeling good enough is actually feeling inferior. And that actually is about having an inferiority complex, which means you may play small, you may let others take the limelight, when actually there are aspects of yourself that you would like to nurture, you would like to develop, but for whatever reason, you don't have the confidence. And for me, confidence, as I said again, can be about, we can read about it, watch videos about it, YouTube it, but confidence comes from trying. So that's about the experience. And if you look at my personal page, I put up a post from Idris Elba today about him talking about just giving things a go, because often we stay in one lane, and often, sadly, sometimes we can be fed this small life that we're supposed to have. And I feel like when you're trying to defy those odds, when people have a perception of you and an expectation that you should just be doing this, you stay in this lane, it can be very difficult. And so one thing that I've worked on in terms of building my own confidence to feel good enough is I have worked on like going outside of my comfort zone. But one of the factors that has been beneficial to my journey is having mentors. So if you are on your journey and you're trying to move on, move up from your situation, then I think it's like you need to think about who are safe people who you can also put yourself around. Because if we don't feel good enough, the reality is sometimes, often, not all the time, but people in your circle can absolutely benefit from that. And sometimes, this is the real odd one, they'll cuss you and curse you for doing this, whatever, and you need to change. And when you do start to change, somehow, for some bizarre reason, they don't like it and they've got something to say. And that can be a really interesting part of your journey. So if that speaks to you, if you're someone who doesn't feel good enough, if you're watching this video and this speaks to you, feel free to inbox me. I can get the comments, the questions on my laptop. I'm filming on my phone, because this is a serious journey and has great consequences for your life. You can stay with it, not feeling good enough, or you can make a choice to try to change. And, you know, change is not easy, but neither is being stuck. Neither is going round in the same circle, because that is very difficult, that's hard, that can be painful. And if you're a mother or a father, you know what, I guess maybe parenting, because I am a parent, but it has consequences. And so it's about how can you take steps to begin to feel good enough. Because when you feel inadequate, it will show up. It will show up most acutely, I believe, in intimate relationships. It will show up in your career. It will show up in your thinking, and it will show up in your relationships. So this isn't just about intimacy. This is about how people treat you. And the reality of it is we teach people how to treat us. Now, if you think you're a victim, if everybody's horrible to you and you don't get this FB Live is not going to be for you, because I am for people who are baffled by their situation. I'm the girl that's for people who are like confused as to why they keep getting themselves in situations again and again, and you want to make sense of it. If you want to make sense of your situation in terms of why people treat you like rubbish, or why people violate you, then my encouragement is you have to start to look at what do you do that gives them permission. And for me, when I read my first self-help book by Jan Levansan, in the meantime, I was like, that was the first place I ever began to realize that I'm actually a part of the process. I actually enable nonsense behavior to happen to me. So if that speaks to you, give your girl a like, because I know how tricky and how difficult this is for people. And and this is why feeling good enough internally is a part of the Feel Loved program that I'll be delivering on Saturday, the 28th of September, because as you know, I'm a psychotherapist. I see people individually, but what I've seen individually affects people like globally, universally. We're often, I see people individually, and sometimes I'm like, there's so many people who experience the same issue. So why not bring people together so that together we can learn to like challenge ourselves, gain insights, so that we can become our #best self. Isn't that what we want for ourselves? Isn't there something inside of you? Do you ever have that, like there's a part of you that knows that you can do better, or you're not supposed to be where you are? I don't know if it's a Keeley thing. I doubt it, because what's personal is often universal. But even when I was in my darkest of situations, a part of me always felt like I wasn't supposed to be where I was. Intuitively, I knew that I was supposed to be somewhere different. Now, where that was, I didn't know. But on this journey, we spoke about this in the Feel Loved group this week. When you're and you're serious about changing your life, then I do believe that it becomes a spiritual walk. And your intuition, your conscience, is a massive part of that journey. If you agree with me, if you get it, that actually it's a spiritual walk, because it's about turning in on you and you beginning to believe in you beginning to believe that voice within that you can do better, you can rise above your circumstance. Give your girl a like. And again, if you have any questions, do send them to me here, because it gets lonely on my own. Okay, so here's a question. Why do people take my kindness for weakness? Well, one of the reasons, the reason why people take your kindness for weakness is because you allow it. And I think my bigger question to you in terms of why people take your kindness for weakness, thank you for your question. Can you give me a thumbs up? Much appreciated. Is that you allow it. Now, that is a very succinct answer, and it can be very annoying. But the reality is, people only treat you how you allow them to treat you. So I guess the real ultimate challenge is, do you have an issue saying no? Do you always feel the need to say yes to others? Because if that's the case, then are people taking your kindness for weakness, or are they seeing an opportunity to use someone and they're capitalizing on it? we can look at this two ways, because I think I see it in a way that people, it's a bit like if you go to the train station back in the day and the gates were open, people would ride the train for free because they see an opportunity and they take it. And so if you perpetually allow people to take your car, you have to start to think about, well, what are you doing that enables that? Because you're actually enabling it. And if you don't see that you're enabling it, or if you have a problem with that response, then you're going to have to do victim blaming. There's nothing wrong with being a giver, and this links back to my video about it's not a curse to care. What you need are boundaries. And if you don't have no boundaries, then this is what will happen. People will use you and they will abuse you, because if they can ride the train for free, people will ride the train for free. You know, if people can get something, they will take it generally. Not all people, but generally. So I guess for me, it's always about you. And this is, you know, this is one of the challenges that you will have to kind of like, if anybody wants to work with me, this is one of the challenges that they face, is that I'll hear you talk about others. I need to get a sense of your world, but ultimately I'm going to be turning the mirror back on you, because I'm going to want to understand how we do it to ourselves. Because I firmly believe that we create our reality, and we create our reality through the vehicle of our choices, the choices that we make. And so often, and this is why I scrutinize our choices, is the choices that we're making actually feed into our sadness. Yeah. And sometimes we've made them so quick. They're so knee-jerk, such knee-jerk reactions, that actually we don't realize we're doing it to ourselves. So when you take your phone, rude girl, and you unblock Derek, yeah, and you let him back in your life, then who's doing it to you? Who's doing it to you? Now, obviously, there are extreme circumstances where, you know, relationships can be particularly volatile. And if that is the case, you know, you may be someone who needs to call the domestic abuse hotline. That is a 24-hour number, and I can leave a link below. But ultimately, if you're someone who's gone from abusive relationship to abusive relationship, then ultimately there is going to be something about you not rating you not feeling good enough that factors in. And so that's what we would be looking at. That's what I would encourage you to start to look at. And often these experiences of not feeling good enough, if we're not like depending, can have roots in our childhood. And so we need to be very careful. You know, we need to be thoughtful and compassionate with ourselves. Sometimes